Hey, welcome everybody. It's Monday morning. We got our coffee going. Um, yeah, so let's just kick things off. The sorry for the late start. First off, for anybody that is joining us now, not on Twitch, we are dual streaming on YouTube. Unfortunately, one of the side effects we are seeming to have with this is that we are getting. Hang on, I think something's. We're having issues now. We are using Restream, or at least I'm attempting to use Restream. One of the issues with Restream is that on the free version, at least, we are stuck with the indicator in the top right corner. So let me just make sure this is coming through as expected. Oh, it looks to be coming through fine. Well, on YouTube, it's coming through, or sorry, on Twitch, it's coming through fine on Twitch. Of course, immediate difficulties. Let me see what's going on here. I've never used Restream before, so bear with me. It does look like everything's coming through fine on Twitch, but there we go. Okay. Looks like it was just the player update. All right. So yes, we are officially dual streaming between YouTube and Twitch. Twat, twat. Chat should be merged. I don't have it displaying on the screen, although I did recently find a way that I might be able to do that. So hopefully in the near future we will have that up and running as well. So unfortunately, you may or may not be able to see chat from other or see messages coming in that I will be responding to as we go. I will try and make sure to read off any messages that I respond to ahead of time so that you guys can have the context required across both streams, just to bridge that gap in knowledge. The What else did we do over the weekend? We now have a Discord. The Discord information should be linked in the on the Twitch channel. I believe I might not have updated on YouTube. I might need to still do that. Let me just add a note for myself real quick. We'll get to this here in a moment. At the very least, I am certain that we added the URLs to the channel. So if you're on YouTube or Twitch for that matter, you should be able to find the informational links as part of channel links. I just want to see if I can do like what we have on Twitch, where we have a more customized layout, which is leads me into the other thing I did over the weekend. If you visit the Twitch channel, then you will be able to find a little bit of customization on the About section below to include links to the Discord and the YouTube, um, stuff like that. So it's just a little bit cleaner of a layout. I also did a little bit of work on getting things set up with some additional scenes, like you can see this one now, where we have a full screen camera. Unfortunately, I am using an old webcam. I might need to upgrade that. The video quality is not what I would call great, and I'm sure the dual compression going through to you guys isn't doing me any favors. Per requirements, I am now showing the songs that are playing in the bottom right. I'm still struggling to get notifications running off of it. I did come up with the solution that I can create a small browser portal, so that's what you guys are seeing in the bottom right corner. When we transition out of this view, all of it but the actual name will go away. Unfortunately, that is as small as I can get that window, so that's kind of where we're stuck at. It may the information there may come and go as I interact with it, but if we're just letting it run, it should be consistently there. So if you want to see the name of the song or the artist, that is always should always be in the bottom right corner now. And then I guess the big news is that I was did a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Digging over the weekend, I guess. And I came to the conclusion during that time that we have roughly 6 weeks before, I guess it's a little bit shorter than that. We got about 4 or 5 weeks between now and when the Pirate Software Game Jam starts. I do still intend on joining that game jam, but there's nothing preventing us from doing game jams between now and then, and we're getting to that point now to we're just we've done the most basic of basics, and so anything between now and then, it would be nice to get a little more customization, a little more personalization in on it, and create something, ideally something new or a derivative of work, and not just, you know, cookie cutter. And that's the path where we've been kind of heading down, is adding more and more customization anyways. And so adding the extra themes and constraints from a game jam helps to scope and cultivate those ideas. That being said, uh, the there are surprisingly large number of game jams going on right now, and so I had to go through and figure out which ones made sense for us, which what timing overlaps worked, and those kinds of things. I have this information on what game jams we will be joining posted to the uh, Discord. If you guys are interested in seeing all of that information at any point in time, there's now a Game Jams channel in there, which should house all of this information. Um, but yeah, the first on that list is the One Button Game Jam. So let me switch over to our other view. This is it. So officially, this game jam actually started 3 days ago. So we will be at a slight disadvantage joining it a little bit late, but we will just make sure that as we're going through, we scope to that. Uh, the nice thing about this game jam is it ends pretty much when we normally try and end stream, which is 4 p.m. local time for me, the on the 21st. So it gives us a nice time frame. It'll be done before we go into the holidays. It does give us a little bit of more room than I was intending, but it's hard to get a perfect layout and stuff like that. That does mean we have a few days of downtime, and then the next game jam that is we are intending to go on. Let me just pull up Discord real quick. There we go. Nope, I have the wrong date in here. I have it listed as the 24th on here, but it's actually the 21st. The next game jam starts on the 27th, which is the incremental game jam. So this is the game jam that is the least exciting for me, um, just because I don't play a lot of incremental games. Incremental games are think idle games or clicker games. I don't play a lot of these. I have played some in the past, but it's not something I normally play. The main reason for choosing this game jam though is the time frame. So it pushes us out of our comfort zone and places us into something that I don't normally do, but should be well within the wheelhouse of what we're building. And what I mean by that is um, idle games and clicker games don't usually involve much in the way of like collision detection and those kinds of things, which is something that we can do, but it's not something that's given to us. since we are building it directly on SDL, which means if we want to run collision detection, I'm doing all the math for it. So when it comes to collision detection between, let's say, boxes like square shapes and stuff like that, it's surprisingly easy. It's not a complex algorithm, but it does mean when we start dealing with rotated objects and circular surfaces and different shapes of polygons and things like that, we have to move away from the what they call AABB collision detection to SAT, which is you're starting to look into like vector math in order to be able to determine if they are colliding. And even in 2D spaces, the complexity shoots up quite a bit. And so when we're looking at incremental games, there's very little to no collision detection going on. These are usually like, you know, click on something. And so we don't need to worry about those objects colliding. You're not usually controlling the character directly if there is a character at all. A lot of good ones for this are like, how fast can you click the button, and then something's processing in the background, um, showing off what you're doing, stuff like that. Oh, I should also mention in the one button jam, the entire core concept of this is that you have exactly one button. Um, that button can be left mouse button, or it can be space. They actually encourage that you to do like space and left mouse and whatever, but they all does the exact same action. You can have a one-click action, a two-click action, a long press, a short press, so you can add variability to that one button. But it needs to be a consistent singular button. You can't do things like have multiple visual buttons on the screen and make it to where they left click and then just click through, and depending on what location they click determines the action. No, it has to be a single action trigger, um, which adds a lot of limitations to how we build things. So you can think like the side scrollers where you jump to get over um, obstacles, things like that. If the only controls you have in that situation is the space button or the space bar to jump, that fits into it pretty well. I'm just rearranging screens real quick. So the the whole concept here, from a technical standpoint, relies on the singular button. We do have a theme for this already, although in this game jam the theme is optional. We can use 0 to all 3 of these. We can choose our own words for themes, whatever we want. So this one has the most, is so far, is going to be the most restrictive on mechanics, but the least restrictive when it comes to themes. Incremental hasn't released theirs yet. That's pretty common for themes to be posted when it opens. The next one, which is one of the ones I'm more excited for, that we plan on joining, is the 1-bit jam. Again, this is going to be a very restrictive one, but it's not restrictive from a mechanical sense. It's restrictive from an art style. The 1-bit jam only allows for colors within one of like 2 options. So you can do black and white, hence why this is all black and white. You can do red and blue if you want, and so you get to choose 2 colors, and that's it. All of your arts, all of your assets, everything visual needs to fall within this color space. Again, they haven't disclosed their theme, but this is going to be the next one after that. This one will start in early January, and this will be the last one, which will give us a roughly 5-day window between close of this jam and start of the Pirate software one, which will be, of course, the next one after that. I believe the longest gap is going to be between these two, because this one starts on the 27th, which will be it's 1 p.m. on the 27th, so it means I can take, and I do plan on taking, but I can take Christmas and Christmas Day and probably the day after Christmas off. It also ends the 21st, so if we want to, we can take Christmas Eve off. So they'll give us the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th with nothing going on. During that time, I will do some streams, in particular the days leading up to Christmas. I will likely take Christmas Day and probably Christmas Eve, which I believe this year is a Thursday and Friday, um, just to spend time with my family and be offline and just kind of unwind. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of the schedule coming up for the game jams. Like I said, the one button jam has already started, so we are a little bit behind on this, but we are going to dive into figuring out what we're going to build and starting down that path today. The other things that I wanted to talk about are a lot of it is tied to this, which is what that whole document was that was open when I first screen shared. Um, so let's hop into that. I'm going to keep this open. So we've got our themes: Worm, Typhoon, Echo. The restrictions on here. Uh, it is a one-button game jam. We need to lock it down to our interactions being just the spacebar, for example. We can trigger it however we want, but that's what we're locked into on requirements. It needs to be a web build. Um, this is just some things on how we want to do that. We want to avoid text as much as possible, and then we want to keep accessibility in mind as we go. Since this is not a one color, I do intend to have color to it. I did come up with a few initial concepts last night, thinking over the one button style and these themes. I was really struggling with these themes. Like I can come up with a lot of good things for like Echo, for example. These two are quite difficult for me. I haven't. I think I came up with one for Worm. Um, the problem I kept running into, especially with the Echo one, is it's like sure I can come up with themes that would incorporate Echo, but they need to be within the realm of stuff we can do. Like for example, I was thinking it would be cool to be able to do a traversal game based on echolocation. So when you press the space bar, I don't. The problem there's two problems with this concept. It sounds cool having that like it sends out a sound wave that reveals terrain as it goes, and then for a short duration, kind of like you would have for echolocation. So it gives you an idea of where things are at. Two main problems with that. One button. So if you have a button to reveal the landscape to you, that's all you can do. Um, and then if you just have it auto happen every so often, it kind of removes the like gameplay from the main core concept of it, and now it just becomes an art thing, which is a little weird. And then second, in order to do a visual propagation thing like that, we're going to have to start dealing with a lot of vector math because it's how those kinds of spherical collisions are handled, which is going to be a bit of a problem because we have to do reflections and stuff like that. So that's a lot of mechanical stuff. It would make a lot more sense to run off a game engine for something like that. Um, Other definitions of the word echo are things like, a clone or simile, stuff like that. Again, I ran into the same thing of, we start getting into like, it'd be cool, but what's the purpose of cloning? If we're trying to keep our collision detection as low as possible or negligible or none, then I battle simulator, but if you can spacebars clone, or we get into puzzlers, and another thing I want to avoid on from a requirement standpoint. Um, let's do that. Limitations. We got one button, obviously. Uh, Little to no text. This game jam is intended to be a like bilingual international kind of thing. So the more text we have, the more of a disadvantage it becomes for us because we need to translate it. Or it needs to be a completely optional thing that does not impact the gameplay in any way for people that can't read it. Um, we want to do. I want to keep it to low, art, low and simple art assets. Low complexity. I guess simple art assets, few simple art assets. I don't want to. I'm not an artist. I don't want to go art crazy. So we want to keep that as simplistic as possible. The That's another thing is no or simple collision detection, which is squares. So we want to avoid anything that's going to be heavy or you know anything that's intended to be fast paced, or even just even if it's slow. Some other ones I've seen over time, trying to do a little bit of research, is stuff like creation of like tower defenses where you control the tower and you press space and it shoots, or you hold space and it changes direction and it just kind of rotates back and forth. It's fine to run something like that, and the collision detection, if we do those in squares, isn't particularly complex, but it would mean a large chunk of our time is just doing collision detection and not the game itself. And so some things that would fit into this are like Papers, Please, which is mostly static screens. Um, so there's no collision detection going on in a game like that. Another option would be like auto battlers, because we don't need them. We know where we know where all units or whatever are going to be at all times. When I say auto battlers here, I'm not talking like Dota auto chess where they run and fight each other. I'm more talking like an idle game where you know the battles happen in the background while you're watching something else, stuff like that, where we know exactly where the characters are going to be at all times. Um, Technically, from an art asset standpoint, another game that would fit in here would be like Pokemon, because well, the older like Pokemon's like Red and Blue and stuff like that, because you know exactly where the creatures are going to be. They do not interact with each other. They don't have any collision. You just add an animation, and that's their attack. Um, so that helps us avoid dealing with collision. It is a very menu heavy approach. Um, so I was thinking in a game I think would work really well with this style that is a little more complex than the usual would be something like a card battlers, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a battle system for it, but like what is it? Into the Gungeon, I believe it is that when you are fighting, you choose a card, and that's your attack for it. And so we don't need to handle collision detection. Um, you can space once to move to next card, hold space to select a card. So from a game system standpoint, it fits into one button easily. So it kind of ticks two off there. Um, Stuff like that. Um, I'm not a big dialogue person, but we also don't want that, so it'd be nice to avoid that. I don't want to do anything rhythm or music based, just because I'm again not a musician, so it's hard for me. Like I could build the mechanics for a rhythm game pretty easily, just press space at the correct timing. The problem comes in that a rhythm based game implies music to go with it, um, or it's just gonna feel weird. If there's nothing to time your rhythm off of it, the game becomes astronomically difficult because you're keeping rhythm in step without something to keep it in step with. So we could do, we could theoretically do rhythm games that are tied to visuals. So like the shrieking ring, and you have to line up, kind of thing. that would be an option for us, and we can do that pretty easily without anything from a collision detection standpoint. So that would, I guess, be an option. So it's technically a rhythm game, but it's visuals instead of music. Uh, what other limitations do we need on this? We want essentially the the aspects of creating a game are going to require you to do dialogue, story, the like, the lore of the world, music, sound effects, the sounds of the world, um, the art, so the visuals of the world. Those three are going to be the weakest for me. They're also going to take the longest for me to do something that fits in. Um, so like the time optimization is pretty low there. The mechanics is the coding side of it, and that's where my strong suit is. So diving into the mechanical side is what's best for me. Unfortunately, when we're looking at one button games, like it really restricts what we can do from a mechanic standpoint. So leaning into that's going to be a little bit harder with a game jam like this, but that's also kind of a good thing. Uh, so if we keep that with our limitations, let's look into mechanical systems that would work for us. We can do no contact battlers. So this is where we have the Pokemon, which we don't want to do because um, when you start looking at monster battlers and things like that, the like collection style requires a lot of assets and variety. Um, this is going to be art intensive for us, so we don't really want to do something like Pokemon. When we start looking at battlers in general, we need a variety of enemies. It can't just be adding increasing quantities like we can with a roguelite or something. That just doesn't make sense. We need something visual to distinguish them. We can get away with some reskinning of just like use the exact same thing as is, just add a different color, but that's not the only thing. Or as more importantly, that'll only get us so far. The other options we do have is like auto slash idle style battlers. Um, I personally like card battlers. The the Pokemon style is a little bit different in that it's a collection, like it's a monster battler, is technically. Uh, the intention is that you collect them, so you need a variety. When you get into these two, yes, you need a variety when it comes to enemies, but we only need to make a short. Oh, that does bring in one other thing that I want to limit on here is I want um, a small slash single. I actually let's a single room is what we're going for here. The idea behind this being is we don't want to have to create a bunch of levels. So avoid level design. It's not something I'm good at. Our engine doesn't have since we're not using an engine to be exact, we don't have a level editor, which means that creation of levels is going to be slow. Um, so it's not that we can't do this. It's just that with only having 6 days and a few hours, um, we want to avoid anything that we can that will increase complexity. So one of the nice things from like card battlers is we just need to make a backdrop and we're good. Um, so idle games fit well into this. The auto style games, we can have like auto runners. Um, I'd prefer not to do an auto runner, but that is a fallback for us if we need to just build something. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of mechanical systems that you can simplify down to single button press. Uh, like you can even get shooting games where your character is stationary or auto running, and you use the spacebar like one click to change direction and then hold to shoot, or vice versa, or your single button does both, change direction and shoot, stuff like that. So you do have that as a possible option as well. Hang on, I just want to test something real quick. I just want to make sure audio is coming through. I have, again, Restream. I'm still learning how to use Restream. I haven't tested anything on it, so we're just kind of going with it. So I don't know if any of the systems are working, if the audio is coming through good, anything like that. Um, yeah, I'm really leaning pretty heavily towards this card system. I really rather like the idea of just like you get a draw of three cards, each with a different action to perform. You press space to cycle through which one you have selected, and then you hold space to select a card, and then something happens. And then if we wanted to go towards an auto idler situation, or sorry, if we want to go towards an auto situation, this could be handled. This something could be combat. We can do it in a simulation system, so this could be some sort of mechanical system triggers in the background for tweaking the outcomes, stuff like that. Um, I don't know if we could do a strategy system. It'd be kind of hard to do resource management or anything that would make it for a good strategy game. One, in our time frame, but two, in a way that it's a single card draw every so often. You know what I mean? Or maybe, five cards and you get to choose two out of three. But in the case of a strategy game, you're going to want to both manage your resources and perform the actions. That's the strategy side of it. Um, you don't want it to be too heavily RNG based. So I think it'd be better to be simulation games or a battle system or something like that. We can then run, you know, whatever happens off of it. It could be a time-based function for an idler. It could be action happens and then it loops back to draw another card for like a battler, for example, stuff like that. I am really kind of liking the idea of like a a game dev tycoon style, where you are your card draws will have like maybe you have a like three draw system where one is a uh, call it round modifier, and then you have I guess in context this would be something like a what's hype. So like what are people looking for? And so it might give a boost to I don't know RPGs, but then give I don't there's not a key for a down arrow, is there? Whatever. So a boost to RPGs and a reduction to strategy games for a set duration. And so if you manage to complete an RPG game during this window, then it gets increased, you know, score. If you complete a strategy game, then it would get decreased. And then your second draw would be a something like a operations card, which would be sitting in the category of increased productivity, but at the cost of a decrease to morale. You know what I mean? Like over time. And so you get some sort of modifier that goes on, and then you would have something like a which would allow you to tweak how your progress is being done. And so you'd have different options you could draw on that. And then the final one would be like event. And so you might get card draws that would allow you to, and this one we might even just be like fully randomized, so there's only one option. And this one might be something along the lines of, I don't know, what's indie game con? There's a yeah, Indie Nomcon, something like that. You know, some game dev conference, which would boost to sales, or you might have a you know lead dev quit, which will come at the a detriment to productivity. This is the core concept behind a game dev tycoon, where you oh, and then I guess you would have one other one that would be a more sporadic style. So you would have these. These are your turns, and this would be your cycle. Um, endearing, and then we might have at the end of a cycle. Let's do research in cycle. I guess I don't need these quotes for these dividers. And so you get a research card that would let you, unlock RPGs, for example. And then in cycle start, you would be choose game composition, which it'd be like probably like choose a genre, and then you'd have another draw that gives you, oops, uh, choose a mechanical system, which might be like MMO or uh, single player or whatever. Something along those lines. There might be a few more of these to flesh out the system. But this would let you'd start a cycle by getting random draws, which would help you lock in a game to build. Then you would have a series of turns. We would probably have to do a multi-cycle system. And so you would have like cycles from a like what are people looking for standpoint. So you would have your I kind of want to decouple these. So you'd have something like a overarching time cycle. So we'll call them seasons. That would control what's hype for this gaming season. There might be other modifiers that would fit within here. Then you would have a we have a game creation cycle, which is where you would choose your genre, choose your mechanical system, whatever we do to allow you to select what you're going to have your company build. Again, we don't have to do this as game dev. This is just the most recent of this style that I've played. I do like to play these kinds of games, by the way. And then you'd have the turn system, which would be like day-night cycles. And so this would be each day iteration would get one of these cards until something happened. And then these would be this would be like a RNG event trigger style system. So every day night cycle draws a card, a visual happens, rinse and repeat. Every so many cycles, every so many of these day night cycles would have an increasing chance of triggering some sort of event, which could either be good or bad. And then upon completion of a game, you would get a research cycle, which would do your unlocks. And then seasons would be, instead of an RNG event trigger, it'd be a static, like you get 30 days kind of thing. Finished off my coffee already. So seasons would be like 30-day periods. And then you get game creation, which is going to be each one of these would, increase time to completion. So it's increasing complexity, and complexity would then determine how many day-night cycles you're going to need, which would then get modified by like depending on your team, which you'd be able to get like an event trigger in here might be new hire, for example. And so we would need stats and the combination of morale, productivity modifiers, and your staff or whatever would give you the complexity per cycle. And then upon hitting a certain point, you would complete a game, which would trigger your research, which would loop back to game creation. So it'd be something like this. This might be every like 7 to 14 days. And so you'd have your modifiers, game loop. So you'd run through this, repeat as needed on this, and then you would complete with this, and then it would loop back to trigger this over again. That's kind of what I would be thinking if we went down the path of a tycoon style. And then we would need some way to do the one button. So click to cycle, hold to select on a RNG card system would work. But this would be simulation game. It's got a lot of RNG aspects. If we introduce, you know, during run unlocks, as well as some sort of this would technically, as it's described below, this would technically fit as a roguelike. Each run would have randomized that you could then produce solution through. Art for getting enough of these to make sense would be a little difficult. The core functionality isn't particularly hard because I'm writing all this in C++, so I can do this all real easy in pure code. Like we can probably knock out the entirety of this logical game loop system in a day, just writing C++ code. Um, but this would give us a roguelike simulation game with a, all in a one button context. The question is, doesn't it make sense to do that? All right, let me go grab some coffee, think about this for a second, and see if we want to go forward with this or not. Again, we don't have to do it as game dev, but the simulation roguelike in a one-button context, I think fits pretty well, and it would be fairly creative on how it's done. I don't see this being a super common way of handling things, and it fits well into a focus on mechanics, and we can downplay a lot of the visual side of it. Technically, we could do this as a text-based game even if we want to. But all right. Give me a moment. I'm going to go grab coffee, and I will be right back. And we're back. Alright. I'm kind of liking how this is looking. I don't know how we're going to fit it into the theme, although technically these themes are optional. I think this is our biggest struggle. Well, at least my biggest struggle is how do I relate it back to this? I think we have a pretty solid way of handling our core gameplay loop. But without a theme and direction in mind, we're going to struggle when it comes to art, if we want to include any music, those kinds of things, and we're going to struggle with our, like, you know, in particular, our game creation. So our game creation, yeah, the game creation loop where we choose, what are we choosing? If it's a game, then obviously we're choosing genre and mechanical systems and things like that. But if we choose a theme, this might not become an option for us any longer. I don't see how we could do this sort of loop under, say, game dev or even like a business tycoon or anything along those lines with these themes. This is the question. So I don't know if I don't really know of anything that follows this. Actually, I do. It is enter the gungeon. No, it's not enter the gungeon. What was I thinking? I believe I have it on Steam. It'd be a rogue like deck builder is kind of what we're going for here, and in a way that technically would be correct. The reason I say that is adding and removing cards from your deck is what makes it a deck builder. The I think things like, well, actually no. If we went this path, research this segment down here when you choose this would give you um, different cards during your game creation loop. We could also have seasons and event triggers inject cards into the deck. If we wanted to really lean into the deck builder side, we would, add the ability to add and remove cards. I think it makes more sense for these to be randomized within pools that are not consumed, so that would deviate pretty heavily from deck builders. Then also, like, this would add an option, but it wouldn't change weights in any way. Um, Maybe we add a few different options that come in to add different options in different categories, kind of thing. But I think we just keep it to where you cannot remove cards. That reduces complexity quite a bit. The I am still trying to find the game that was it's coming to mind. I'm so bad with names. It's bad. It's a whole thing. Uh, it's a very popular one too. Slay the Spire. That is the game I was thinking of. Slay the Spire. So it'd be a combination of roguelike deck builders, um, business tycoon games. So this is what we're effectively looking at: a roguelike deck builder, trimmed down so it's not full deck builder, combined with a business tycoon, again trimmed down so it's not a full business tycoon, which gives us a simulation roguelike genre that we fit into. I want roguelike over roguelite because this research modifies a run. Um, we do need to outline. So we got modifiers. Let's be uh, the thought processing. These would be they wouldn't be run modifiers. This would be during run modifiers. This would be our core game loop. We need to then introduce per run modifiers to give that true roguelike feel. These will change periodically throughout a run, persist for the full run. We could have things like high turnover. Um, people are more likely to quit, for example. So this would be a run long modifier. It would be a run long modifier. So for the entire duration of your run, you would have to deal with this. These would be periodically changing ones. This one is a like a constant every 30 or whatever we choose. We'd have to tweak that. Day-night cycles. Um, this would update. This is an RNG one. So every X random number between these two cycle ranges, this one would update. And then you get your core game loop. So this would modify before, during, core loop. Then we would have a post game where we want to handle things like summary. If we wanted to make this a rogue light, this is where our unlocks would go. If it wasn't something that was, so if it was something based on, doing X during a game, this is where we would do technically trigger unlocks. Like complete a run that lasts longer than 60 days, for example. That would be one way of handling unlocks here for a rogue light, but we don't want to do a rogue light because when we start adding persistent unlock modifiers, then it implies we also need to introduce a persistence layer, which means file storage, which is one more added layer of complexity. So we'd have a post-game summary. We do need to handle win, lose. Let's do win conditions and lose conditions. So a lose condition could be something like all employees quit. Ran out of funding. We probably want to introduce difficulty level. An easy one for this is can't fall below X employees. That'd be an easy one. And so on higher difficulties, you'd have to deal with this. But on lower difficulties, you would never have this as a lose condition kind of thing. Win conditions can either be survive X rounds. We could do hit X games or products delivered. We can do hit X currency. We would need something like every week cycle. Let's call this the payroll cycle, probably on like a 14-day. And so you would have to pay out employees. I kind of like syncing these two up. And so we would have, pay bills. Sorry about that. Including salaries. I know way more about software development than I do about game development. If we do a software developer tycoon setup and start tweaking things under that, this still makes sense. The what's hype we could change to um, like consulting projects. And so you would choose a contract kind of segment, and this would no longer be a seasonal thing. We could still use event modifiers. It would change what's available to us though. Um, I still like the idea of these being offset from one another on cycles. One being a rigid cycle and one being an RNG based cycle. We still have the concept of post game. Our win conditions and our lose conditions stay the same. Our core loop is app creation. You, instead of choosing a genre, I'm trying to think of a way we can do this. Uh, so if we follow this concept up here, this implies that this is what your firm is building over the next 30 days. At which point, these go away. Like you no longer get to choose what it is. Your day-night cycle would still work. This would be how you progress, and then your research would still work. This would just unlock new projects for you to choose from. So these two still make sense. I think I can think of two ways to handle this. The first way is we keep this, tweak it to be application development, of course, but we keep this app creation section, and your firm would be running two concurrent projects at all times. So you would need to complete your consulting project. If you fail to complete this within the time frame, then you would lose the game. Upon completion, it would pay out some value. And so this would help as long as you are continuing to process this then you can pay the bills essentially is the core concept. So we could get rid of paying the bills, and as long as you're completing your monthly contract, we just kind of behind the scenes handle this one, which gives a little bit of variability for this mechanic. But then we run into the how do we, like, this would be create your own SaaS, software as a service, for anybody that's not familiar with that acronym, or a web application or a website, or some desktop application, or like a IDE, an editor, whatever. And so you're creating some sort of, you design a product to create, and but then we still run that risk of, like, how do we handle acceptance within the industry? I kind of, the more we talk about this, the more I want to lean towards this, but the less interesting our core gameplay loop is. I don't know how to make the progression of that unless we change. Oh, the other idea I had is if we change this to, instead of being like the app creation level, if we lean into that and do like um, requirements gathering, which gives us the nice like you can find things like requirements gathering is a hard one because we could do this as a split phase thing. And so consulting on projects, we take on the given option on a contract to choose from. So we choose a contract. We do requirements gathering, which would identify some further modifiers. And so we could get things, and then this would go away. No, we would still want this. Um, research, data night cycle, and then research slash payout. Get paid. And then this variability would no longer be a month long. This would be part of our core loop. So this becomes problematic unless we tie it to the event trigger. But I think we have something like this. We do choose a contract, which gives us an option. Then we do requirements gathering, which would give us some contract specific modifiers, which would end at the end of this contract. And then we would do something like a prototyping phase, so our MVP. This would allow us to do some kind of decision choices on, do we go with wireframes? Or do we go with, an interactive prototype? And so wireframes are a reduction in time, maybe a reduction in complexity, which are good things. We want both of these to go down. Technically, we'll just call it complexity. We'll just hand wave complexity as time. But it also would come at the cost of customer satisfaction initially. Um, and so an interactive prototype, conversely, would have an increase in customer satisfaction, but it would come at the cost of complexity. And so effectively, this would set us back on time. I like the idea of introducing a time period So this would outline time. Our variables here would be time, complexity, I don't like using the word time here, deadline. We should use time. Time and complexity are the two main modifiers that come to mind. Oh, and of course if there's an operational cost and payout. So each project would have some mix of these values that would distinguish between the different contracts. Requirements gathering could be something like, increased time. This would be a good one. Or increased complexity, which would be a bad one. This is very common in industry. You go out and land some sort of contract with some sort of, like, we'll give you $10,000 to complete this within a month, for example. You have an outline on what is expected and what to deliver, and then you go through the full requirements gathering phase. If it's not part of the contract details. So if you're like using a service and it's a posted contract and you're bidding on a contract, this gets locked in, then you might have to do additional requirements gathering to get additional further details that weren't divulged to you, and that will impact what needs to be built. Um, and so sometimes you end up with increases in complexity, um, or they come back and they're like, we want this instead of, I know we know you signed a, 3-month delivery date contract, but we need phase 1 in 2 weeks. And so you get this, reduction in time kind of thing. And so all of a sudden your deadline is much shorter for a portion of it. That's extremely common. It depends a lot on how your contract is worded, but if you're going through a contract and consulting agency, or you yourself are not the one doing the bids on the contract, the odds of these changing go up dramatically because they non-engineers don't tend to think through all of the avenues that could impact this. If it's this weird merger of like um, engineering skills combined with business acumen, I guess is the best way of phrasing it, to determine how good you are at getting these two in alignment on your first go. And the reason I say that is because a sales guy is going to sell it. He's not going to care. Engineering is going to figure it out. This happened a lot when I was working for big companies that were focused on sales, where somebody would come to them that is using our product and is some big, like, they've spent a lot of money on our product, and so they come back to sales and they're like, we're going to leave unless XYZ happens, and sales will negotiate and reduce it down or something like that, or upsell. That's the worst one. We have a product that we're trying to sell, and then sales is like, oh yeah, we can fit that in, no problem. And now we have a signed contract that hits engineering, and they're like, 10 new features due next week. And that's where there's this just disconnect between the contract and the requirements. And so, and this happens way more often when your engineering team is not tied to your sales team in any way. But this would give us the ability to do a further stage on requirements gathering. So this would lock us in on a contract. Then you do requirements gathering, which would provide some sort of modifiers for the duration of the gameplay loop. You MVP, which would give a second set of modifiers. Um, and in some of these cases, you might get lucky and you chose a interactive prototype or something like that, and it's good enough that it buys you extra time. So I like the idea of having a duel of these two phases. It's going to be hard to make this a cohesive and enjoyable gameplay loop. I like the this one is game planning, we'll call it. I really kind of like this more ad hoc. You get to pick what you're working on. This seems a lot more enjoyable as a mechanic than this style of like choose pick your poison and then refine it. And this is more of a like free form. I really like this a lot more because then this in this loop it's a success or fail. In this loop style, at the end of it, there can be shades of gray in between. It's like you built some undesirable genre of game and it undersold, and so it comes in a negative, but it's not like it didn't sell at all. It's not like your employees didn't gain experience and increase their productivity or something like that. And so I really like this. We could still tie some of those aspects into the gameplay loop for this one because we could remove bill pay. We could introduce, so if we get rid of this, upon completion of a contract, it's either success or fail, which is allows you to continue on until you either fail one of these contracts or all employees quit. Your employees could progress and level up, improve their productivity as time goes on, but the entire time, instead of increasing their cost tied to that, the time goes down, complexity goes up, operational costs get introduced, and payout gets, we no longer have payout. Operational costs would no longer make sense either. So each iteration, your time and complexity are increasing and decreasing, but the amount your employees can do um, increases. And I'm really leaning towards this. I really like the idea of having the more free-form loop. So let's back out to that. Is there a world where we can rig this to anything else? Huh. It's a hard one. It leans this open-ended creation like setup feels a lot better. But the reality is, at the end of the day, your game creation loop is just a series of RNG cards. It's just flavoring them. So if we distill this down and remove, this is, you know, insert creation type here, or insert product here. It's mostly flavoring past that. We trim this down to a core game loop and a product cycle. So we have a per run modifiers. This persists. This is going to be until you win or lose. That's the idea of this. During run modifiers, which is going to be your product cycle, we'll call it. And so I like the idea of having multiple stages of modifiers on this. Let's do a time cycle. And then we would modify this further and have the RNG, 7 to 14 day style, and then static, our 30-day style. So this would be kind of like our events. These are RNG events, and these are randomized, still randomized, but the time being randomized. And these are every so often events. And so this would be things like gotta pay the bills kind of thing. Oh, hang on just a second. Interesting. Just got a phone call. I was just checking in on that. I need to handle this. Alright. Looks like my stream froze. Let me just check in on this real quick. Okay, there we go. I'm having troubles with Restream. It likes the user interface for it likes to just lock up. Although that being said, it looks like I'm having similar issues with the downstream for YouTube as well. So that might be a separate or similar issue that's going on between the two. I'm not sure. All right, but so in the product cycle is kind of like our core gameplay loop. We would just have something like a setup loop, conclusion to the cycle, and then repeat. And then separate from that, we would have this. And so during the product cycle, you would have our setup, we would have our iteration, which would be our loop. Sorry, this whole thing is our gameplay loop, our core gameplay loop. So that's this whole segment here. is this. And so we would still need our setup, which is the choose a product to build. And this would be a series of one or more of these like card style themed, you know, like build your own insert. So you would choose your modifiers. So in a game, it would be like or building games, it'd be like choose your genre, choose your mechanics, choose your engine, yada yada, art style, whatever. Um, in a the in a software situation, it would be, choose a, like we could do the more build your own and like choose a complexity level, which would control your what's the word I'm looking for? Income range, like the payout range, and then you'd have the option to like choose your framework and choose your language or whatever. And so we do have the option in theory of being able to run that in a very similar fashion uh, of like building out your own product. We just have to keep in mind this might include like 5+ card selections. Um, but this is a once per product cycle. Gameplay loop is repeats until loss, win, loss. No. So until loss condition or product completion. And then we would have the conclusion, which is going to be, we would have something like research, payout, stuff like that. This would be once per product cycle can trigger win condition. So you cannot, if it's a survive X number of rounds, this would turn into deliver X products. Earn X currency kind of thing. So these would be your win conditions. These would be your lose conditions. We'd have a post-game summary to show how many products you delivered, how much you earned, how many employees you had, yada yada. And so we'd have things like payout. We would want level up employees, which would also, so research would look something like this. We would have a payout. Level up employees. We might have tech upgrades. I like the upgrade system because we can have like unlock RPGs, so we could get new genres of products, or um, maybe we have something like upgrade computers, which would increase productivity, or something along those lines. We could do one of these, two of these, five of these. We could tie it to our iteration product complexity, something like that. Payout, which is going to be a combination of how you did, as well as your modifiers and your setup phase. that would determine your payout. You might have a penalty, or you might get a bonus, or something like that. A level up segment where it's just going to be an informational dump on, employees increased in productivity, but now cost more, stuff like that. Um, I like this as a core concept. I like how this is looking. I like this overall as a core concept. We then, of course, have our post-game summary, our win and lose conditions. This gives us a pretty easy, or a pretty flushed out way of handling this. That is overwhelmingly code. So it's a heavy, heavy focus on mechanics and not much when it comes to um, art, music, stuff like that. I think I think a lack of we will have to do a lot of sound effects, I think, but I think a lack of music might still be a detriment to us. So we might need to do settings menus and at least some base level background music and stuff like that. All right, let me go to the bathroom real quick, grab some more coffee, and just stew on this for a moment and think if we're missing anything. But I'll be right back. Alright, and we are back. I like our core gameplay loop here. I think this will be in a unique and fairly enjoyable take on a one button. What we're building from a product standpoint, I think still needs some refinement. So that one might take a little bit. This is where I think the Worm Typhoon Echo theme words would come in. I don't want to. I like this overall style and loop and how we're doing this. But what I don't want to do is tie it too close to like Game Dev Tycoon. It's an easy one because we're doing game dev right now. The flexibility in choosing the product you're going to build and all that stuff leans real well into this RNG style, like the game creation loop. Plays real well into this. However, if we index too heavily on that, we start getting real close to Game Dev Tycoon as which is one of our inspirations, which means we're in a direct competition standpoint with them. I don't know if that's going to be. It would be a problem if we try and eventually turn this into a full game, but if the intention is just a game jam, I think we're fine. That being said, we still aren't related to our themes in any way. So we have a good. How we're going to handle the mechanics, I think works great. The card style system. So we could start working on menus. We could start working on the card selection and display system, things like that. All pretty straightforward. From in a lot of ways, we can get to animations and stuff down the road, but uh, this gives us a way to handle placing out cards, or sorry, getting that out of the way to where you can choose a card, we can render the cards, display them, all that stuff. I think is important. We can put literally anything on our card though at this point, and I don't think it's going to really matter. I think we avoid high complexity art style, which means we might just do. Ooh, this gets into a conflict with one of our other things. If our goal, like this system is very, very text heavy, I just realized, because time, complexity, all those kinds of things, they're gonna, if we, unless we come up with a bunch of icons to indicate what those mean, it's all words, you know what I mean? So now that becomes an issue for us because one of our limitations we were going for is little to no text. We've innately built a system here that kind of requires a decent amount of text. That is going to be a bit of an option or a bit of a problem for us. Ooh, I didn't think about that. It leans well in our one button, simple from an art style. We could even trim it down to just a card structure with text on it. You know what I mean? So that's all good. It would require no collision detection. We could get away with just some simple background music, repeating background music. It's a single room, so we don't need anything from a standpoint of level design. It's really this little to no text problem. The more important, it's not necessarily the quantity of text, it's the importance of the text. The more important the text becomes, the bigger of an issue we have. So we would need, if it's purely flavor text on our cards, that's not a problem. It's when the cards contain text that indicates mechanics that we start running into issues. So increased complexity, decreased time, things like that, those are modifiers in our mechanics system displayed through text. We could, in theory, create icons for all of those and do it through like visual representation, not text, but then we still have that issue of like increased on a clock means increased time. Great, we can visually lay that out. However, what's increased time mean? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like if you don't know what the word, like it's like a stopwatch, for example, as our indicator for time. If an green up arrow next to a stopwatch is what we're using for increase in time, how do we know if that's a good thing or bad thing? And then it gets into our accessibility stuff. Green is usually used for good increases, red for bad or decreases or something like that. So we could say if it's up in green, it's good. If it's down in green, it's good. And then the inverse is with red is, bad. However, what about people that are red-green colorblind? They can't tell the difference between the two, so those colors no longer mean anything. So then we're having to stray from the norm on color definitions of what mean good and bad in a game um, to accommodate colorblind, but we lose the context of what those mean. And also we can't show the text. So how do we then define, or we can't rely on text. So how then do we define good versus bad? That becomes a problem for us, especially in a game like this where the entirety of the card, like the text on the card, determines whether or not you want to choose the card. In a standard roguelite, you don't normally have negative modifiers going on. So this, because we're running a simulation genre mix, we have negative modifiers on our roguelike cards. That becomes a bit of an issue for us because now we need to indicate good and bad, so positive and negative attributes in a way that is non-verbal and visually accessible. I think we just go with it. We define cards. We maybe make some simple card assets. I don't know if we want to do card assets. I think what we might do is maybe to prototype it, we just create a square and write on it as our asset, and then no animation for it. And so we have, yeah, and then we can put the text on it. link our card to our card visual asset to a game version of the card, and then we figure the rest out later. If we have to keep text when we submit it, we just, you know, we're not as accessible of a game. Unfortunate, but we still built it. You know what I mean? Um, if we stall on this too long, we've run the risk of not completing it in a point where it is playable. And so I kind of want to wrap this up. We've already been going for 2 hours. I like where we're landing on this. We just need to. I think we might just have to not do the theme. I can't think of a tasteful way of incorporating these. Let's do. I just recently heard of something, so I need to search it real quick. I made a note about it. I'm just trying to find where I put it. There it is. All right. Never used this before. This is Milanote. It's supposed to help with do visual layouts and design so that we can do brainstorming. This is exactly what I want to do, actually. All right. All right. So let's start with our theme option. The most likely for us, I feel like, to succeed here is Echo. Hmm. Echo. Let's do. What are the definitions of echo? We have the obvious, which is a sound or series of sound caused by the reflection of sound waves. So we have reflection. Um, Reverberation. repetition. Let's do it this way. We're going to run out of these real quick. So we have reflection, typically of something like radio, radar, sound, something like that. We've got reverberation. This is again usually tied to sound. Um, those are going to be hard for us. If I was better at music, those would make a lot more sense. So we might have to drop those. Repetition. Usually of an idea, feeling, style, or event. Yeah, it's overwhelmingly sound based. Repetition, reminiscent, which is shared characteristics. In computing, it's copy back a signal or character. Okay, so we've got repetition. We've got reminiscent. And we've got a repeat copy back. Can't grab. No, of course I can't. Let's move this one here. Let's link. Oh, these are meant to be images. Let's delink that. I want it to be this as our base. So let's link those. So now wherever I move this, that line follows. So I should be able to do this now. Perfect. Okay. Let's link you to this guy. I'll move you there. Oh, bring you down here. And let's link you to this guy, and then we can grab this and bring you down here. Alright, so at the top level, repetition. From here, I kind of want, can I repeat one of these style cards? Oh yeah, that's perfect. Repetition. We can do it of idea, feeling, style, event. idea, feeling, style, event. Let's link you to here. Just drop all that here for now. I immediately think of when we combined the repetition from idea, feeling, and event, I immediately think of a roguelike. This is immediately what I think of, which actually works out really well for us if we follow that line. What else is feasible for us from a repetition standpoint? Let me go ahead and just get these out of the way. I kind of feel like copyback might actually fit under repetition. So instead of copyback, let's call this reflection, which is, I would argue, is under repetition. So let's grab these and delete them. We don't need duplicates of that. Upload an image, link note to do. Yeah, we should be good with that. So let's change this line to point to reminiscent. We can get rid of this. Let's move it out of the way for now. We can bring this in a little bit. Actually, let's bring out just Ted. Do we have the space to? Nope, we cannot. So we are going to need to lead it across this way. All right, roguelite, reflection, which is to repeat back a signal. I think that fits under it. Repetition. Maybe actually we'd go ahead and set reflection as its own thing. This another thing that comes to mind off of the repetition side of things is a repetition is a one of the definitions is a piece set by a teacher to be learned by heart and recited. So we have reciting, which in my mind, when I see this from the context of a game, it would be like a match style game. Another option is repeating from the sense of music, but we're trying to avoid things that require relying on music. Um, Geometry is a good one. Is this just a note card? No. We have geometry, which is the concept of repeating visual. Oh, oh, great. Hop back in here. We're in the middle of brainstorming. Geometry. Repeating visual design. At least it's auto saving. That saves us a hassle. Sorry about that. Let me just clean this up a little bit real quick. Let's repeating actions. We under repeating actions or events. I think another thing that would fit under here is like typing games. We can't do this though from a um, one button, but we could do a variance of this, which is rhythm games. So this needs to be crossed out. see if there's an easy way to do that in here. Can I just draw? Okay. That's going to be a bit of a pain. I wonder if there's a way we can merge these. Let's just lock their position so we can't change it. That works. Actually, let's unlock. Whoop. Move up here and then lock them there. That way it's a little bit easier to work around. Okay, so we can't do typing games because it's going to require more than what our one-button system will allow us to do. Roguelikes in our simple one-button style. We've got our, what we ended up on initially. We've got our card selection battler style. So it turns out that that actually would work for us now that we followed this down because of repeating actions and events. That works out really well for us, actually. So this is meant to be the contextual setup for a game design document. This feels a little light. You know what I mean? I would have expected a little bit more in the game design because this doesn't mention once anywhere. Because you got brainstorming, which we just went through, which is deciding on our high level, but it doesn't have anything from the conceptual side of things. It's to document out because we've got like world building, level design, character map, game characters, so we can design out our characters. But there's nothing in here about mechanics, which is what we're most interested in for something like this. Our level design is going to be absurdly simplistic, like intentionally so. So, is this what we want? I think a user flow diagram does kind of fit the most for what we're looking for here. Yeah, let's use this template. So we've got if we take all of this, move this over here for now, we have main menu. Which can go into new game. Let's not do a save game. Settings. Quit. There's nothing to do for snapping. That's unfortunate. I kind of like the idea of introducing a continue. Given time, I think it would be good for us to do continue. But can we add a? Let's just do thumbs down. Um, this is going to be a thumbs up. Obviously, this one needs to be a thumbs up. These two are hard requirements. Maybe a thumbs up, thumbs down isn't the right. Up symbols. +1. I literally want an arrow pointing up. Okay, I guess we'll have to go with that. So these are very important for us to complete. This would be our next level, and then this is the next level down after that. So down. Highly important. Reduce importance. Unimportant. So it gives us 3 tiers for when we're doing scoping. New game will transition to initialize. We don't really need an action on this one. So here's our main menu, goes to one of these. This is pretty self-explanatory. Closes the game. This will be easy for us. Oh. So this is initialize game state. Page 1 of, or which would go into our new run. So let me grab something to drink and just take a little second to walk and just think about things to figure out, kind of get my thoughts together. So give me just one moment. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I think the play here is to go ahead and go down the route of a game dev tycoon style. It fits nicely into our like core loop. If it's we have a good definition of it. It's not the most what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm not the most familiar with the path, but it is obvious enough based on what I do know and what is publicly available that we should be able to make a decent simile. Um, so yeah, let's go that route. Which means let me snap some screens around, zoom in a little bit so you guys can see better. All right, our screen here is going to be upon choosing a new game. We would want to jump into our, we'll call them global modifiers. Just delete all these. This should just be a note. Yep. From global modifiers, we transition to our, we'll call them, let's change this to run modifiers, to selection of our phase modifiers. Let's call it cycle modifiers. If this isn't a note, what is it? Is it a comment? No. Eh, not important. I can just double click and set up a note, so that's what we're going to run with. All right. Cycle modifiers. Then the next step here is going to be, we'll call these run modifiers, cycle modifiers, which transitions to our product cycle. We'll call this, we'll call it the creation cycle. Sure. Creation cycle then transitions over to setup, which we will want to further define. Setup then transitions to, I should move setup up here. Setup then transitions to our gameplay loop, which includes transition you down like that, which includes the I think setup needs to have define game being built through RNG cards. Again, we're going for flow here, not individual details. Gameplay loop. Can I do that? No, I cannot loop back. I can transition it to something else and then back, though. So the core gameplay loop. So you set up, which defines your cards, which then transitions to the loop, which is technically I think I've kind of bridged these where the time cycle and product cycle. So the cycle modifiers. Let me zoom out and see this at higher level. Setup is the cycle modifiers. So we got setup. We define this as cycle modifiers from RNG cards. That's our setup, which means I need to delete this. From setup, we transition into requirements gathering, which is going to be things like define genre, define systems, use RNG cards to define genre, define system, so on and so forth. So this is our requirements gathering portion of it. So run modifiers, which determines our setup, which is our cycle modifiers. We then do requirements gathering, which determines effectively what they're building. And then we transition to our day-night cycle, which is our core loop. So day cycle is where we make operational decisions. Then we have a night cycle where we get to see the outcomes. And then we've got a conclusion phase, which is product completion, RN payout, leveling, and run unlocks or upgrades. So we transition to the day cycle. From day, we transition to night. From night, we can transition to day, or we can transition to conclusion. From conclusion, setup is where we define the product. So we can transition back to conclusion. So we do setup, requirements gathering, our day-night iteration cycle to conclusion, back to setup. And this is our gameplay loop. Conclusion alternatively, and so this is a continue. Can I label? Continue. From here, we have two other states we can transition to, which is going to be in both these cases, it's a post-game summary. We want to show games created, money, let's see, total revenue, total expenses, win-loss. And so in both these cases, we're transitioning here based on win or lose. So this is our win or loss. From the win or loss state, we transition back to main menu. So let's move this here as the other location we can transition to. Let's move these out of the way so that we can add a transition line back to main menu. So this just transitions to this is a hard one for the continue because continue is going to resume from where you left off would be the intention here. In which case we don't know if, let me think about this. I forgot my water. Let me just go grab that. I refilled it but then left it. Continues a bit of an outlier because we are technically you're in a run. So the most logical, the next point would be here. And we are load existing game state. We will, of course, have to clarify what that means at some point in time, but that should be good there. Settings menu, we need to be able to control we want to be able to control SFX volume, music volume, I'll maybe add a full screen button here. Exit back. So this transitions to here, which then transitions back to here. So we can move this. Let's do something like that. Quit closes the game. So we don't need to do anything else with that. So our main menu becomes pretty damn simplistic. Our settings menu doesn't need to be anything complex. We do want some controls, but not much. Most of our time is going to be spent in this loop here, though. So we've got level designs, not game flow. thematically speaking, we are looking at a rogue-like simulation game. Where you run a game development firm. That's kind of the core concept. Let's give it a high-level name. What would be a good name here? Okay. Naming things is so hard. The core gameplay loop is all based around randomized card draws. So, random, repeatable. Words meaning random, repeat. Haphazard. So if we look at game studio names, this kind of adds the conjecture that they cannot modify their game studio name. But that's fine. That's something we could that we could take on later on the road. But we start getting into, whatever entertainment is an option. Or another common one is studios. I was about to say we could use something like Recurrent Studios, but apparently Recurrent Studio is a company. And there's also Recurrent Ventures. So we want to stray away from naming it anything that would be limit searchability. We want to stray away from anything we don't want to have namespace collisions is what we're going for here. We want it to invoke the concept of game development. But we want to stray away from something like game dev X or X game dev or something like that, because I'm pretty sure it's called Game Dev Tycoon. Yeah, it's the literal name of Game Dev Tycoon. So we don't want to call it anything too close to this. Um, Alternative names for apparently in the definition search under Oxford languages, there's one derogatory term meaning tycoon. Uh, Let me see if cannot use the word studio in anything. I feel like uh we're a simulation game. So we want a word in our title that reflects and invokes the thought of simulation. In the case of a business sim, that's going to mean words like tycoon. You could throw the word simulation in there. My thought process of words right now is all over the place. That's why I'm not speaking. Got, if I start trying to speak now, it's just gonna come out gibberish. Uh, the like no brain version for it is like indie sim or indie tycoon or indie dev whatever. So I want to stray away from those. They give an immediate recognition when it comes to, first off, it sandboxes. Using indie instead of game here immediately implies a scope down and small teams. And so when you have like things like Game Dev Tycoon where you can start small and grow, there is no cap. The intention is you can eventually get to AAA status. But when you say indie dev, it implies the argument that eventually we cap at what would be considered reasonable for studios that are still under the category of indie. Um, so that's already a downside for using this in our phrasing. Secondly, anything we do with this is just going to feel real like rip-offy of Game Dev Tycoon. So I don't want to go with that. Which means we kind of want to lead into the other aspect of it, which is roguelike. Um, the gameplay loop, while it is game development themed, it is a roguelike business tycoon. Um, sorry, a roguelike simulation game. So if we lean into that from a phrasing standpoint and focus down on that, we get words that imply that, such as rogue, you know, RNG, procedural, permadeath. Roguelikes tend to be tactical RNG games. Um, it is focused in on usually highly difficult strategy combined with RNG. Well, it doesn't have to be RNG anymore. It is very usually it's procedurally generated, which is where the RNG aspects tend to really shine through when you talk the roguelite as a genre. But it is typically very difficult, learned through repeated failure, with no permanent upgrades between runs. The permanent upgrades is the difference between rogue-like and rogue-lite. We are leaning into the first one because we don't want to handle upgrades, which means we need it to be difficult. Learn through repetition, which means we need skill to take a play in here. We can't just have RNG. You need to. It is okay to have runs where RNG kind of screws you over and says no, but we also want to balance that with you should be able to some extent overcome the RNG. That's where this skill process comes in. So choices, giving some player choice on the path, which is where our uh, modifiers come in, and the fact that they are choices and RNG based, with some being non-RNG based. These kinds of choices allow for some level of skill expression, whereas these choices are where our, well, technically this also is skill expression. But these choices are really the ones that are going to be the big impacts. I think in particular the upgrade system, knowing which upgrades will help and which will hurt at what point in time, I think is going to be a big one on skill expression in this style of game. So it does need to have strategy incorporated into it, which is where our skill expression comes in. No permanent upgrades. We run. Man, it's gonna be hard to think of a name that influences both. All right, incorporates our roguelike concept with the simulation concept and the game dev theme that does not use the word game dev or indie dev or tycoon. I think we start looking into words like business and stuff like that for alternatives. All right. Well, I need to run for a little bit. I'll think about this offline, but I have family here visiting, so I'm going to wrap things up for a little bit. I will stream again here in probably 30 minutes to an hour, or maybe 2 hours at most. But thanks for joining me. When we come back, we'll be wrapping this up and we'll be shifting over to focus more onto the development side of things. I want to get at least through some basic menu selection and get our world set up, so that we can start implementing things and looking into it. The core mechanics aren't drastically complex. Most of our time isn't going to be spent on the core mechanics so much as adding options. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining me. And like I said, I'll be back in 1 to 2 hours, and so we can pick up on this and continue down that road.